Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar on the links between housing and education. We're so happy that you are able to join us today on this first day back to school here in Northern Virginia anyway, so we think this is a timely topic to look at. My name is Lisa Sturdivant, and I'm Vice President for Research at the National Housing Conference. For those of you not familiar with NHC, we're a national organization that provides resources and research around affordable housing issues at the federal, state, and local levels. And we make use of opportunities like webinars like this to connect with housing professionals and others working on the ground to expand access to affordable housing. And as part of our research agenda, we conduct research reviews and write case studies that look at the intersections of housing and other topics. Issues such as health and economic self-sufficiency, and education, which is the topic of today's webinar. So we're happy you've joined us, and I anticipate this is going to be a very informative webinar. I'd like to thank the National Association of Realtors for sponsoring this webinar, as well as several other webinars we've had over the course of the year, and we will have one more under sponsorship from NAR in October. So to get us started, I'm going to introduce our three panelists. We have three great participants on this webinar. Kit Hale is a realtor in the Roanoke, Virginia area and is general manager and managing broker of MKB Realtors. Kit also serves as chair of Housing Virginia, a broad-based statewide partnership of public and private organizations and individuals committed to expanding housing opportunities in the state of Virginia. We have Jenna Tomasello, who is a program associate at the American Youth Policy Forum, which is a nonpartisan organization that works to bring together policymakers, practitioners, and researchers to frame issues, inform policy, and create conversations about improving education and young people's lives. And last but not least, Courtney Reeve is Executive Director of the Greenbrier Learning Center in Arlington, Virginia. The Greenbrier Learning Center works with children and families to promote education, youth leadership, and strong families through structured enrichment programs beyond the school day. And I'd like to thank each of the panelists for participating in this webinar today, and I'm looking forward to hearing from each of them. Before we get started, a few final introductory notes. Our most frequently asked question, is this being recorded? And yes, it is. An archived copy of this webinar will be made available to you and to anyone else who's registered. We'll send the link out within about 48 hours, and it will have the recorded webinar as well as the PowerPoint presentations from our presenters. Second, please note that all of the participant lines are muted in order to ensure clear sound quality. However, we want to take questions from people listening in, so if you have a question at any time during the webinar, please submit it through the question box, which you'll see on your GoToWebinar control panel. We'll be keeping track of the questions that are asked, and we'll have some time for those at the end of the presentations. And finally, on technical difficulties, we hope the webinar runs smoothly. If it doesn't, if you run into any technical problems, please use the help menu at the top of the GoToWebinar control panel to locate technical support. If that doesn't work, please visit the GoToWebinar support website, which is support.citrixonline.com. All right then, so we'll get started, and I'm going to start here with a little bit of background information on what we know from the research on the links between affordable housing and education. This fall, millions of children across the country are returning to school. However, for many, insufficient family incomes and a lack of adequate supply of affordable housing means that in addition to homework and tests, many children and their families will be worrying about where they will live or how they'll pay the rent. There's a growing body of research that shows that stable, affordable housing may increase students' opportunities for success in school, and student achievement has been shown to be a critical predictor of economic well-being later in life. A stable and supportive housing and neighborhood environment can complement efforts of educators and others to help improve student achievement. I'm just going to take a few minutes to review what we know from the research on the link between affordable housing and education, and to highlight briefly some of the affordable housing and community development policies that have been shown to help children do well in school. Families move a lot and families can move for a lot of different reasons, but when families move because of unsafe housing conditions, rising rents, or for other reasons related to unstable housing situations, children can be adversely affected. The moves can cause interruptions in instruction, excessive absenteeism, stress, disruptions of peer networks, and so on. And so we actually probably don't need research to tell us this, but moving a lot and changing schools a lot can be disruptive and can make it more difficult for children to do well in school. The research is pretty striking, though. Numerous studies have found that children who change schools frequently have lower test scores. Moves during kindergarten and high school, moves between 4th and 8th grade. Research has shown that in whatever grade students are in, there can be disruption, but moves in early years are often manifest themselves later in lower grades in high school, so there can be a long-standing impact of frequent moves. Children living in poverty who move frequently are also much more likely than other poor children to have behavior and attention problems. Children who move a lot are more likely to drop out of high school than comparable children who don't move. And classrooms and schools and other children in schools with hypermobile populations can also suffer. More remedial work is needed, more time is spent on discipline, teachers often move at a slower pace. And so housing programs can help reduce mobility that disrupts children's learning. Affordable housing, rent subsidies, housing counseling, particularly to help prevent foreclosure, and other stabilization programs can help reduce the frequency of moves and help children do better in school. Now, not all moves, of course, are detrimental. In fact, research has shown that well-designed housing mobility programs, these are programs that allow families to take a housing voucher to rent an apartment or a home in any neighborhood, can help families move into neighborhoods with better schools, which can lead to better school performance. So there's this idea of housing mobility being associated with good school outcomes. In a little bit, Jenna is going to talk about school mobility programs and how having access to these schools through other means can also be an important way to help kids do good in school. So the Housing Choice Voucher Program can provide some of the best opportunities for accessing neighborhoods with good schools when two things happen. First, when counseling is provided on options on different neighborhoods, on the process for moving, on how to get acquainted with new neighborhoods. And the second is good programs when vouchers are easily used through a region or administered regionally. Baltimore is an example of a regional voucher program. Other housing programs can help lower income families live in areas with better public schools. These programs include mixed income housing development, inclusionary housing programs, and other local programs that help families access strong schools. Existing research, and there's not a lot of it, but the research we do know shows there's a strong association between housing crowding or overcrowding, which is usually measured as a person per room or person per bedroom. So an association between overcrowding and reduced academic performance. There's a lot of reasons why overcrowding can adversely impact children's education. It can reduce parental responsiveness. There can be increases in noise and chaos that interfere with studying. Frankly, overcrowding can just result in a lack of space to sit down and do homework. So overcrowding can at least partially be alleviated through housing homeownership programs that help families move into homes they own, local zoning that creates incentives to build family cockroaches and rodents, pesticides, lead paint, mold, can all affect improving building maintenance, can help create healthy homes and create better environments so that students can be better prepared for school. Holistic community development. It can be part of a more comprehensive community development. Courtney Reeve in a little bit about the Greenbrier Learning Center, which is a program that works with the community in a broad sense, so it's not narrowly focused on housing or just on education. So there's other more direct ways that affordable housing can be part of broader community development. When you do redevelopment efforts and construction or rehabilitation of schools is part of that comprehensive community development, you can really link housing and schools together. Affordable housing may reduce homelessness. we found that children who experience homelessness face numerous barriers to good educational outcomes. They have difficulty accessing preschool and head start. They can live in adverse living conditions that impede cognitive development and limit study time. And there can be difficulties in obtaining personal records for enrollment in public schools. Homelessness can have different long-term effects on children depending on their age at first episode of homelessness. We've reviewed recent research that suggests that homelessness is particularly detrimental in the long run, even for infants and toddlers. So being able to address homelessness early on has important implications for later in children's lives. One federal program, the McKinneyVento Program, provides resources to schools to help homeless children stay in school, including providing transportation to and from school. And there's some other pieces of the McKinneyVento Program that helps schools work with children and families that are facing homelessness. So the research is very clear. A lack of stable and affordable housing can be associated with poor school performance. A supportive and stable home environment is a critical complement to the efforts of teachers, principals, and other educators who are committed to the academic success of children throughout the country. So we're going to move beyond this research review, and we're going to hear from our other panelists to talking about how they experience this link between housing and education, and how housing and school policy can work together to help children do better in school. So with that, I'm going to turn the presentation over to Kit Hale from the Roanoke Valley Realtors Association and from Housing Virginia, and he is going to present on some of his perspectives on this link between housing and education. Kit, I'll turn it over to you.
Very good, Lisa. Thank you so much. You talked about technology problems earlier. I hope I'm not one of them. Can y'all see my screen?
Yep, Kit, you are good to go.
All right. Very good. Let me get rid of this right here. Very good. Thank you. And I do so much appreciate the opportunity to participate on this webinar and to give the realtor perspective on housing and education. It is my pleasure to be here. So I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to talk first about the realtor commitment to schools and sort of underscore how we're part of the fabric of the community, very much a part of the community in which we live. Not only do we have a stake in the quality of life for our families, and as Lisa mentioned, many schools, many kids are going back to school now. I'm sure many on this webinar are experiencing that very thing, sometimes maybe for the first time, and others may be well into their school years. But we too are concerned about the quality of life for our own families, but we also selfishly accept the fact that our livelihood as realtors depends on vibrant and marketable neighborhoods. We as individuals and through our member organizations are committed to the relationship and dynamic of schools and housing as we work at both the student and school levels. But as Lisa was talking about, and we believe that we also have a broader involvement as advocates that are geared and have the wherewithal to positively affect educational opportunities in our communities. As important as bedrooms, bathrooms, square footage, and so forth, the perception of schools is critical to the marketability of homes. We as realtors have a vested interest in quality schools, and strong schools strengthens community overall, along with the real estate market. The location of schools, of neighborhood schools, is a huge factor in quality of life as it relates to walkability, safe routes, if school-age children need to be on a bus route, and those sorts of things. So it is very much a part of our consideration and our clients' and customers' considerations as they seek their housing choices. And housing affordability is also vital so that our educators, our service and custodial staff, and our security personnel can live near where they work. Parents and as a parent myself of formerly school-age children, it was important for me that our teachers are well rested or part also of the fabric of our neighborhoods. Realtors take an active role. Sometimes it's direct and sometimes it's indirect in ensuring adequate funding and planning for successful school systems. Examples of direct roles are serving on our local planning commissions or our school boards and city council boards of supervisors, those decision makers that understand the dynamic and the value of a well-funded school system. And a more indirect role is we boast a national membership of about 1.2 million members. And with that sort of grassroots influence, we seek to elect realtor-friendly candidates that understand, among many things, the value of a vibrant real estate market, and that relationship to a vibrant real estate market, the relationship to property values. And as it relates to property values, affects tax revenue for local municipalities, and that tax revenue is then directed in part to funding of our schools. And as Lisa was talking more about, also about zoning decisions and those sorts of things. So I'll move next to the slide of our involvement in schools. Realtors involved in the leadership of our schools by doing what parents do, doing what folks interested in their community do, and by volunteering in classroom, on parent-teacher associations, and in extracurricular activities. In addition, we draw attention to sustainable policymaking that results in affordable housing for teachers, that results in site development for new schools, that also results in advocacy for funding and zoning decisions that can affect schools. We as realtors have a unique insight on the intersection of schools and housing because it is a primary concern of home buyers. Real estate consumers make critical choices about schools that have proven and demonstrated achievement and about the convenience in accessing that proven achievement in education. And even real estate consumers without enrolled students consider schools because of the impact not only to housing value but resale potential. Many times we'll have home buyers that don't have school-aged children, don't have any children, and we'll say, well, you know, I'm not really concerned about the schools in the neighborhood. And our response with respect is, unless your next move is by the undertaker, you should be concerned about the schools because of the resale potential in the next home buyer for your home. In my own company, we have a robust training program that includes an emphasis on knowing not only what schools service which neighborhoods, where the school districts are. Also, I encourage our folks to always stay in touch with the school leadership, the superintendents, the school board, so that when we have someone relocating to our market, we can take them and introduce them to the schools. We can drive them by the schools and show them where the proximity of that school is to the home they're considering. And also, the school superintendents are always welcoming to us having our folks interview with them to understand the quality and the programs that those local schools have. So next I'll move to a slide that talks about Realtor Impact on schools, in schools. Realtor engagement supports an environment that's conducive to learning. When schools are afforded comfortable environments for living and learning, their outcomes rise. Students with educational achievement, and Lisa again talked a little bit about this, students with educational achievement uplift the community through positivity and productivity. They become valuable employees and civil contributors. Realtors can be an impact at the classroom level. Our members, again, are active as volunteers and often actively involved as parents of their own children. But the impact can be seen beyond the classroom and sometimes even before the classroom is constructed. Realtors can offer valuable perspective on placement, on planning and capacity as the on-the-ground experts who deal with residential real estate. We know the market, we know the population dynamics and the shifts And more importantly, we hear the questions and perceptions that can affect enrollment. And many times, those perceptions miss the mark. They are misperceptions, misconceptions, and it is often up to us to either play a role in dispelling those misperceptions or pointing them to the folks and the resources in our local school districts that can do that very thing. And we also keep a keen eye on property values and understand that many factors affect property values, not the least of which is the quality of schools and resulting quality of life. So we have many resources. We have expert perspective at the ground level, information gathering that make realtors incredibly effective community ambassadors. Our National Association of Realtors has developed robust toolkits that not only connect the dots between housing and education, it gives sort of the roadmap and the guidance on how to connect those dots. We have smart growth resources, both guides and in dollars, that seek to understand the relationship between good community and neighborhood planning and good education outcomes. And also, we have grant programs that provide dollars to ensure that relationship benefits all the stakeholders. Realtor associations build partnerships with local peers and industries to create momentum for affordable housing opportunities for both instructors and school workers and student families. And finally, realtors are dedicated to their own communities and neighbors and naturally combine their expertise with compassion and volunteerism, mentoring, and funding scholarships. So that concludes my presentation. I just have to underscore what I believe to be the value of our role in quality education and how it affects, again, selfishly, our income, our role in the community, and the vibrancy of our communities. So with that, Lisa, if I can do this properly, I think that concludes my presentation. I will turn this back over to you.
Great, thank you very much, Kit. And as we're getting Jenna's presentation up, I just want to emphasize something that Kit said. That as we think about this issue related to schools and housing, it's really important to engage all of the local stakeholders who are working on this issue, whether you're an affordable housing provider, whether you're working with homeless families, whether you're in the realtor community. Being able to engage with folks who are working on this issue on the local level will really help leverage the resources that are available to talk about this issue. So I'm going to turn it over now to Jenna, who's going to talk a little bit about the work that she's done on school mobility and how that relates to educational outcomes for children.
Thanks, Lisa. I'm very excited to speak with you all today. So just again, my name is Jenna Tomasello, Program Associate at the American Youth Policy Forum. Prior to joining AYPF, much of my experience has involved exploring regional solutions for educational equity, from studying under the mentorship of Dr. Kara Finnegan at the University of Rochester, whose work I draw on heavily in this presentation, to assisting the UCLA Civil Rights Project in a civil rights investigation in Buffalo, New York, and to working with the Great Schools for All community-based coalition in Rochester that's trying to expand Rochester's own interdistrict transfer program. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about a little-known school choice policy that allows students to move across district boundaries for more equitable educational opportunities. So why interdistrict transfer programs? I think it's important to start off with some background and framing. So first, decades of research have consistently indicated that school integration benefits all students, academically, occupationally, and socially. Yet many students experience segregated schooling today. Students of different racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic backgrounds experience between districts, between school, and even within school segregation. For example, in some places, it is unlikely for students of diverse backgrounds to live within the boundaries of the same school district. That would be between district segregation. In large urban areas, the school district may be diverse, but students tend to be separated into different schools. That would be between school. In other places, students become tracked into different classrooms and programs within a school. Students are segregated into different district schools and classrooms for numerous reasons, the most common being simply where a student lives, which I think is why we're having this conversation today. This presentation focuses on interdistrict transfer programs as one promising solution to between-district segregation. Between-district segregation occurs most often in highly fragmented metropolitan areas, and interdistrict transfer programs attempt to disrupt this pattern by allowing students to move across school district boundaries. So to take a minute and understand what I mean by a highly fragmented metropolitan area, consider the maps from the University of Minnesota Law School Institute on Metropolitan Opportunity. These maps of Buffalo and Richmond provide an excellent example of how boundary lines separate communities. I should just note that there's no real reason behind choosing to compare these two localities other than that I'm from Buffalo and I thought that a lot of Virginians might be tuning into this webinar. But these are metropolitan regions that are comparable in size, so I thought they'd be nice to compare. So in looking at maps of Buffalo and Richmond, Buffalo is an example of a highly fragmented metropolitan area. The boundary lines of different towns and villages in Buffalo are very visible just from the map up on the screen. In Buffalo, there are no predominantly non-white suburbs, and only a small fraction are considered to be diverse. Put another way, nearly all suburbs of Buffalo are considered to be predominantly white, that's the blue, with the city's core predominantly non-white, which is red, and diverse, green. The map of Richmond, on the other hand, tells a much different story. Similar to Buffalo, Richmond's city core is predominantly non-white, but many of the suburbs surrounding it are considered to be diverse. If you can actually squint and read the legend on the screen, you can see that Richmond has about twice as many diverse communities than Buffalo, and Buffalo has more than 3 times the number of predominantly white communities than Richmond. In short, these maps show that between-district segregation of students is more prevalent in Buffalo than in Richmond because it is less likely for students of diverse backgrounds in Buffalo to live within the boundaries of the same school district. Now, that's not to say that different kinds of segregation might not exist in either place, but for sake of looking at interdistrict transfer programs, I thought it'd be helpful to point that out. So as I mentioned earlier, interdistrict transfer programs try to disrupt this trend by allowing students to move across boundaries. But what are these programs exactly? They are voluntary school choice programs that are very popular with parents. They typically have long wait lists because they cannot meet the demand of their students and parents. Since the 60s, 13 such programs have been established with a total of 8 currently existing today. Rochester was the first in 1965, and Omaha, Nebraska was the last in 2007. These programs vary in size, with Hartford, Connecticut being the largest with almost 20,000 students, and Rochester, New York being the smallest with only about 600. They also vary in structure with different diversity and enrollment goals. So some programs look at race or they look at socioeconomic status to achieve their diversity, and they have very different means of selecting students. So some select students by a lottery because there's a wait list. Others, like in Rochester, select students based on an interview. They all vary quite a bit. These programs have come about for various reasons also. So some have came about through a court order or through a threat of court order, and others because of a desire to implement a voluntary program following their school district being declared unitary and relinquished from some previous desegregation order. So lots of reasons for why these have come about in different pockets of the country. So despite the variety among these programs, there are several important key features to keep in mind if you are thinking you might want to see one implemented in your community. First, students must be selected to participate by lottery and be granted permanent placement to ensure fairness in the selection and retention of students. So, for example, and I should mention that these programs aren't perfect. I think that at different places throughout the country, there's different challenges that each face. So I'll just share one challenge that Rochester faces. So in Rochester, the program is often criticized for creaming its best students because applicants are not chosen randomly by a lottery. So that's an example of why selection by lottery is a best practice for implementing such programs. 2, diversity goals are necessary to foster integration, or else segregation will likely remain unchanged or increase. So in Omaha, for example, before an explicit before explicit diversity goals were put in place, the open enrollment policy allowed more affluent students to essentially flee the city district, thus worsening the between-district segregation that was already occurring there. Also, third, free and accessible transportation must be provided to all students to encourage participation. It really wouldn't be an accessible program if there weren't transportation provided to all students who'd like to participate. Supports for students and families are also important to ease in the transfer. Educator professional development is also crucial to understand the needs and cultural differences to better serve diverse populations. So, okay, 6, a governance structure that strikes a balance between local autonomy and regional equity is ideal for cross-boundary cooperation and collaboration because it's important that the governing body includes representatives from across the region to ensure that decisions are made with regional equity goals in mind and with the input of all stakeholders. I think that having a realtor like Kit, or that we just heard from, is an important stakeholder in this process and should be a voice at the table, for example. And lastly, place-based incentivized, targeted, and hold harmless funding. So place-based investment is important and needed to support and strengthen urban districts and high-poverty schools to encourage a two-way transfer of students. So you don't want all urban students fleeing the city district and going to suburban schools. You want a two-way movement of students. State and or federal incentivizing funding is needed to encourage districts to enroll students from other districts. So that's a huge challenge right now. There isn't so much funding that incentivizes this kind of thing, either at the state or the federal level, which I think is a big reason why these are only implemented in pockets and across the country. Targeted funding is needed for transportation, professional development, and student and parental support. And lastly, hold harmless funding is needed in the first few years of implementation to encourage participation of districts worried about not meeting certain accountability standards. So with the reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary School Act, maybe this might be a lesser worry. So lastly, here's a list of my references I used for this presentation and the links to their online articles. I think these sources are great, and if you're interested in learning more about specific programs, especially in greater depth. So thanks a lot, and I'd love to continue this conversation. So please feel free to follow up with me with any questions you might have. Thank you.
Great, Jenna. Thank you so much. And Jenna helped us really think about solutions to improving school outcomes that take a regional approach to school mobility. And I'm going to turn it over here in just a minute to Courtney, who's going to share with us a little bit about a more local effort to help support children. And I want to remind you that we will take questions at the end of the presentation. We have several questions that have come in, so please do share your questions. And after we hear from Courtney, who I've just turned the webinar over to, I'll pose questions to our panelists, and we can continue the conversation from there. So Courtney, I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Lisa. I'm happy to be here with all of you, and I have to say we are just about 20 minutes away from welcoming our kids to our after-school program on the first day of school here in Arlington, Virginia. So it's an exciting day and also time for me to be with you. I want to share a little bit about Greenbrier Learning Center's after-school program and the way we really approach serving students who are at risk of falling into the achievement gap, in particular by providing a critical link across school, after school, and home. So if we go to the first slide here, you can see that Greenbrier Learning Center really triangulates these three influencers around students for overall student success, both in terms of academic achievement and generally in terms of being able to make good choices. We serve 80 students in upper elementary school each day after school and in the summer. Although I'll talk about, we reach over 1,000 students through our school partners, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But we serve 80 students in upper elementary school each day after school and in the summer. And our students come from one community site, about half of our students, who live within the community in what would primarily be considered market affordable housing. And then 2 of our sites are actually located on site within affordable housing developments. And I'll just note, because I think this is really interesting for us, all 3 of our sites are within about 1.5 miles of each other, and we see pretty interesting differences in the community site versus the affordable housing site. So the first piece of that triangle is the connection with the schools. We partner closely with Arlington Public Schools. We have 5 public school partners, and those are the schools where our students are enrolled. And these partnerships are formal agreements with the schools on a variety of things, including sharing information as relevant and appropriate to support student success. So that's everything from test scores and assessments to different classroom modifications that are helping students, as well as just providing regular ongoing anecdotal information that can be helpful to the students. We also do a lot of things through those school partnerships in terms of supporting one another, reaching out to students' families. So for example, if Greenbrier Learning Center is really struggling in getting a hold of a student's parents, we might ask the teacher if they've had any luck doing that, and vice versa. Teachers frequently come to us and ask us to either do site visits or to help get a message through to a student's parents. This kind of partnership really is a reciprocal partnership and allows us, the after-school program and the school together, to achieve the kinds of results that we're looking for. In addition to that, our program staff have regular office hours or communication with teachers and staff. So in an ideal setting, our staff are actually on site at the school each week at the same date and time, and teachers are able to drop by and share information, or we're able to rub elbows with teachers in the hallways. And this really allows us to get a lot better quality of information about students. Like, oh, by the way, I meant to ask you about the homework that happened last week, or about a specific incident. And so we're really able to support one another. And then our AmeriCorps members are actually serving in the schools where our students are enrolled, and collectively provide over 2,000 hours per year of direct service to kids in their classrooms. This is really important in several ways. One, it allows us to be a real partner to the schools and to show up with an extra resource with no strings attached for the school. So this basically is an extra set of hands, and our core members can provide in any direct service capacity that best meets the needs of the kids and the school. So they can decide if our AmeriCorps members serve as lunchroom buddies, small group facilitators, one-on-one tutors, whatever the school needs, we show up as that extra resource. And it also allows us to gain more insight into the schools and really to see what the experience is within the school culture, how frequently we see parents or other volunteers in the schools, maybe how we see certain students' behavior in school versus what they're doing after school. There could be a big difference there that's worth exploring and better understanding. So that provides critical insight to us, as well as showing up as a resource for the school. So the school partnerships are really important to the success of our overall program. And then at home, we provided, for example, last year, 126 topic-based workshops for our families. So we work really closely with parents on integrating them into our program, but then also providing a parent connection program. And we have 2 goals within that parent connection program. So the first is helping parents to support their children's education. And this is everything from reading and understanding a child's report card. In particular, if your child is receiving any kind of special services, the report cards sometimes can be very confusing and a little bit difficult to really understand what's happening there. So we have principals and teachers who will sit down with parents and help them to understand their children's report card, help them think of what questions they should go back to the school with. We also role play parent-teacher conferences, so our parents can be more confident in going into the school and talking to teachers and having a real sense of what are good questions to ask. And then we also help our parents to understand how to raise a reader independent of their own literacy skills. which is a critical piece to what we're doing as well. And then the second goal that we have for our Parent Connection program is also helping parents to develop their own skills and confidence such that they can create home and community environments in which children will thrive. And this is everything from financial literacy to nutritional cooking on a budget, healthy lifestyles and exercise and fitness, all of the different topics that parents come to us with asking for help in learning and improving their understanding and skills and confidence. And then after school, our program is each day after school throughout the entire school year, and then for 6 weeks in the summer, we operate a full day after school program. Am I still on the call? Can you hear?
Yeah, we still have you.
Great, okay. And so I want to talk first about the theory of change behind our program and why we serve students in upper elementary grades. So first of all, we know that reading proficiency in upper elementary grades is highly correlated with high school graduation, such that kids who are not reading on target with their respective grade levels are at incredible risk of dropping out of high school or not completing high school. We also know that the lifetime earning potential of someone with a high school, well, even a yearly difference between someone with a high school diploma versus someone without, right away there's a $10,000 difference in earnings. And then the lifetime earning potential of someone who has a high school degree versus someone who doesn't, or has opportunity to go on and receive vocational technical accreditations or college degrees is also significantly different. So our theory of change is that by helping kids in upper elementary grades improve their reading instructional levels, that they're on track to keep up with academic content in middle school and high school, and are on track to graduate from high school, and that then they have every opportunity available to them for their livelihoods and can lead healthy and productive lives with all options open to them. So because of that, we focus a lot on reading in our after-school program and summer program, as well as in some of the work that we do with our parents and families. But this isn't at the expense of STEM or STEAM, or also providing basic academic support to students. Our relationships with the schools is really important here. For example, if we know that students in a certain grade are studying colonial Virginia and 2 entire classes are really struggling with it, that's something that in our after-school program we can adapt our curriculum and content to really better support what they're struggling with in school and really need to master. So the overall academic content, homework help, and then we also focus on the social emotional development of the children and their ability to make good choices. So where does this get us and what are the results that we're achieving? So we're really excited that last year, for the second year in a row, over 90% of our students improved their reading instructional levels or were at the highest level possible. And about 2/3 of our English language learners made significant progress in their language development as well. You can see over 90% of our students earned outstanding, satisfactory, or improving homework grades, and all of our students were able to improve or maintain high expectation points, which is important because this shows their ability to self-regulate their behavior and to ultimately make good choices. So we're getting great results. And how do we do that? So part of it I mentioned with our school partnerships, but critical to connecting the school and the after school and the home is our AmeriCorps program and our 13 full-time AmeriCorps members. So we have 13 full-time AmeriCorps members and 3 program staff who implement this program. The Corps members serve at the schools, they serve after school with our kids each day, and they also serve with our parents and families. This connection across those 3 parts of a child's daily experience, school, after school, and home, help to provide really consistent approaches and make critical links for children. So no one's falling through the cracks here. And the children cannot get away with saying that they did not have homework a particular day because chances are we have their teacher's cell phone number and we're able to text them on the spot and find out if that's true or not. Or we were in their classroom that day and saw the teacher make the assignment. The other piece of this that is also important is that we're able to refer students to and families to other resources and supports. And so that's something that's really important in terms of additional supportive services, being able to connect families with health care that might be really important, or more food security, connecting them with a local food bank, and a number of other supportive services that are important there. I just want to talk for a minute about what we see in terms of our 3 different sites. So as I mentioned, fully half of our students are in committed affordable housing, and fully half are in the community in what we would consider market affordable housing. And we do have marked differences across those sites. So for example, you can see in this column on the left, the committed affordable housing. We know that we have higher rates of parent involvement at those sites. And our theory of that is that because we're right there where the parents live, we've actually tried to be more efficient and have our parent connection programs at just one site, since all of our sites are within 1.5 miles of each other, and have parents come to those programs at just one site. And we cannot make it happen. Parents have shown us that it's pretty difficult for them to get from one site to another, and so they really prefer to be in their community. When we provide the programs on site within affordable housing, we tend to have higher rates of parent involvement and engagement, both in the parent connection program as well as in the after-school program. Compared to the site, the community-based site, where a lot of times kids walk home, we don't see parents as regularly coming to the site, and we also struggle to get them to come to workshops. We also see at the committed affordable housing sites that we have a much higher rate of students returning to us from year to year versus the market site, where we have a pretty significant rate of student mobility and transience, which Lisa referenced in the literature early on. We have a lot of students who leave from year to year. So for example, for 40 spaces at our community-based site, we had 53 students come through the program because we had a number of students leaving. Most frequently, what we have seen cited is housing, students facing eviction, and sometimes healthcare as reasons why students can no longer come to the site. They typically move away. And then finally, the last point that I would make about this is that at the committed affordable sites, we see students and families who have more access to supportive services and better quality referrals. They seem to have a little bit more hand-holding and ability to access what they need versus at our community site, where we really see parents struggling and kind of carrying the burden on their shoulders independently, and struggling to find out what services are out there and what they can access. Even when they come to our after-school program and we can make those kinds of referrals for them, a lot of times we don't hear from them about these challenges, where I think those challenges, from what we've seen, tend to come up a little bit more at the affordable housing sites. So that is my presentation. I'm happy to take questions, but for now I'm going to go ahead and turn the presentation back over to Lisa.
Great. Courtney, thank you very much. And I really appreciate hearing from each of the presenters here, from giving their perspectives. And Courtney, I might start with you with a question. You answered it towards the end. Someone had asked, how the programs offered at the housing developments differ from in-school programs, and you discussed some of the results for families in committed affordable units compared with, and those are subsidized units compared with families in market rate units. And so one of the questions was about data. Do you track these kinds of outcomes for students? Do you present, do you sort of collect data on families and children in order to sort of track these kinds of outcomes for your families that you work with?
We do collect education data on our students and track those outcomes. We don't yet have data for students completing high school, because when we adopted a new program approach about 5 or 6 years ago is when we began this very focused 3-point system with at school, after school, and at home in the community, and also the strong emphasis on the reading instructional levels as part of our theory of change. And so we're currently watching those students progress through the school system, but those students would not yet have graduated from high school. So we do collect education data on our students. Collecting information on families is a bit tougher, but we do parent surveys, and we do try to understand what's happening with the families, but it's a lot harder to get those data. And then on the point about a school-based program versus a community-based program, I'll say that there are a lot of fantastic school-based programs out there. Our experience is that for a lot of times the families that we're serving, families may be intimidated by going to school or uncomfortable in a school setting, and so by having a site that is, in the case of our affordable housing developments, right there where they live, it seems more friendly and accessible, as well as in the community, that they see us more as their partners, I think, whereas sometimes the school can be seen as an other entity. And so we really try to help bridge that link across school and community for our families and help make it a little bit more friendly and accessible to them.
That makes a lot of sense. And you talked a lot about community, so I'll just pose one more question to you that we have here is, if you had recommendations for how other communities could implement the type of program that you have there at the Greenbrier Learning Center, what sort of recommendations or what sort of advice would you have for other places to help think about doing this kind of work in their community?
Sure. Well, thank you. We're really excited about the kinds of outcomes that we're getting and the quality of the work that we're doing. So we're very much happy to share that information. I would say some of the big lessons learned that have come out of it from us are that the school partnerships are really critical, and the quality of the school partnerships, it can't be superficial in any way. It has to be a really strong partnership that is a two-way street, with both partners bringing resources to the table and seeing one another as working together toward a solution. In schools where there isn't that relationship, then I think the overall quality of the results falls down because that piece has been so imperative.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much for that. So a question that I'll pose to Kit here in just a minute, I'll also take a crack at it, was sort of this broad question about having access to affordable housing being a growing challenge in many communities across the country. And so what often happens is that families look to move to places where rents and home prices are lower, which can often mean that they live in districts where the schools aren't quite as good. And so, the question is really what can be done at the local level to expand affordable housing options. And Kit, I know you mentioned a couple of ways in which local realtors have been involved with local zoning commissions or planning commissions. If you were to talk about one thing that folks could do at the local level to help encourage the production and the preservation of more housing that's affordable to families of all incomes, what would be the one thing that you think would be the most valuable step?
I think dispelling perceptions and the not in my backyard mentality of having mixed income, inclusionary zoning type outcomes and planning commissions and boards of supervisors and such, so that this idea of affordable housing in a neighborhood with market rate or expensive housing will not affect property values in the way that folks believe that they will. So I think one of the most important things that we can do as realtors is to better understand the dynamic of housing choices, of the design of affordable housing that can fit very well into neighborhoods, that can fit very well into the communities, and so the communities become more diverse. The communities become more accepting of affordable housing mixed with upper income housing. I think that as long as we can keep that at the forefront, making sure that when we meet with our our own members and to better have them understand that dynamic, and also when we meet with zoning boards and planning commissions, and take an active role in advocacy for mixed income, mixed use, walkable communities. Those types of things are important. So I think in my mind, one of the most critical things is to have a keen awareness to zoning issues. Does that help?
Yeah, I think that's a really important point to make. I think, at the local level, housing policy is school policy, and housing policy is land use policy, land use and zoning policy. So being able to understand the rules that govern what types of housing are built at the local level is really a critical first step to helping to advocate for the development of a broad range of housing types. I want to turn it back over to Jenna with a question about the school mobility program, and to explain a little bit more about the effects of a streamlined transfer process, how these processes might be more streamlined, and how that could have a more positive impact on children, and how the funding works for the sending schools and the receiving schools, to sort of help understand a little bit better how those transfers work.
Yeah, so I think that was a great question about streamlining the transfer process. I agree that I think, and I can find more information that backs this up, but I think certainly the more simplified the process is, the better likelihood that it's going to be more accessible to students, and there's a greater likelihood of students applying, and again paired with ensuring that it's a lottery system. If there's a wait list, I think that that's crucial. I don't know if that answers the question fully, but
talk a little bit about how the funding works. Does the funding go with the student, and how would a school, say in the center city that sends children to better schools, how does their funding impacted by those transfers?
Yeah, I can speak from my experience looking at Rochester, but these are all different. So some places, before I get into Rochester, some places utilize our federal magnet school assistance program. So Hartford, Connecticut gets money to run some of their programs to fund their magnet schools, which helps with the two-way transfer of students, so making really robust, high-quality magnet schools that are drawing folks back in to the city, or at least potentially keeping them there, who already enjoy living in Hartford. But I think, so in Rochester, the per pupil funding from the state follows the student. So if a student participates in the interdistrict transfer program there, an urban student transferring to a suburban school, that suburban school will receive the per pupil funding for that student. And so that's a huge incentive for suburban communities. In practice, if it were truly a two-way program that they're working hard to get it back to that again, the funding would also transfer from the suburban district to the urban district on a per pupil basis. But these places do it differently all over, so that's just one example. But some of those resources there, and I can point to explicitly, which discuss the different funding options.
Yeah, so that's helpful. So Courtney, if I could, another question to you, and since we're on the topic of funding, there's a question about how your program receives funding and what sort of relationship you have with the county government. I know there's no housing authority in Arlington County, but is there any sort of funding relationship with the local jurisdiction?
Sure. So first of all, I'll reference the AmeriCorps grant. So we have a fairly significant AmeriCorps program here, which is a federal program. And then in addition to that, we also are part of a 21st Century Community Learning Center partnership with one of our local affordable housing developers and one of the local schools. And so those are two significant pieces of federal support that we receive that flow through our state. As far as local funding, we do not receive any local out-of-school time funds, but we do receive some funding through affordable housing here in Arlington County. I would say that the bulk of our funding, though, comes from private sources, and so for a program like ours, we really have to go out and fundraise and look to individuals and private support.
Great, thanks for that. Sort of switching gears again, sorry to go back and forth, but a question about the school mobility program, and really how does this regional school mobility program differ from busing that we saw in the 1970s? So I'll turn that over to Jenna.
I think that's such a great question, and I completely understand why that was asked given my presentation. So I think the biggest and most obvious reason is that these are voluntary transfer programs. They're not mandatory court-ordered transfer programs. And I think that it is a real challenge in the community to embrace this kind of thing. I think certainly in all 8 communities there's been political challenges, and there's certainly been like community pushback to some of these policies, because I think that because of the historical sort of stigma attached to busing. So yeah, I think that's such a great question, and I would love to talk more about it with anybody who'd like to share more.
That's great. Well, that's great. Well, you know, we've hit 3 o'clock here, and I don't want to keep us any longer, so I do want to let everyone on the phone know that all of the PowerPoint presentations with the presenter's contact information will be available to you. We will send that information out in an email, and you can feel free to reach out directly to our panelists. We got to a lot of our questions, but I know we didn't reach all of them, so please feel free to email me or to email any of our panelists. I want to thank you for attending the webinar this afternoon, and to thank the panelists and the National Association of Realtors for sponsoring today's webinar. More details about other NHC webinars can be found on our website at nhc.org, or please feel free again to reach out to me directly. So to Kit and to Jenna and to Courtney, thank you very much for your time today. Courtney, good luck with your first day of after-school programs. And to everyone else, good luck with the fall, and we look forward to meeting with you again on a webinar in the future. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Thank you.